who dominate the advertising landscape with 75% of the funding are corrupt.
Ooh. Corrupt is a very broad...
No, it's...
Do you think that
corrupt with a tinge of malevolence, willing to extract money out of people by putting their health on the line?
Do you think that we get effective drugs from pharmaceutical companies?
Not particularly.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jordan Peterson is going to sit down with a leftist that really likes to talk, and I respect him for that. Destiny. And guess what? They're going to reach a middle ground in a very particular way.
What do you mean none of it? What do you make of the excess deaths?
Related to vaccines, there are almost none. The mRNA vaccines have been administered related to vaccines.
We don't know. No.
We absolutely know. We absolutely. This is like settled science.
What do we know?
In terms of vaccine related deaths?
No, that's not my question. Excess deaths in Europe are up about 20%, and they have been since the end of the COVID pandemic.
Sounds really high to me. 20%?
Go look.
I'll check afterwards, but is this including like the Ukrainian war with Russia?
No, it's not including the Ukrainian war.
Okay.
No.
Are you implying that you think it's because of vaccines?
I'm not implying anything. I'm saying what the excess deaths are.
But what is your take on what's causing it? Well, you said that in a counter to me describing mRNA vaccines. You said, well, the excess deaths are 20%. That makes it sense that the implication is that the vaccines are causing it.
No, that is your implication.
First of all, something is causing it.
Well, that obviously, yeah.
Something is causing it, or some combination of factors.
Sure.
Now, one possibility is that the healthcare systems were so disrupted by our insane focus on the COVID epidemic that we're still mopping up as a consequence of that.
Wait, are these excess deaths tracing back through COVID as well?
Post-COVID.
Just post-COVID.
Post-COVID.
Okay.
Right. They're terrifying. Right. They're terrifying. And they're not well publicized. And
I think excess trusts are the fact that you're speaking to them right now seems like...
Yeah, but I ferret down a lot of rabbit holes. It's not like it's front bloody page news on the New York Times.
Sure, but I think excess deaths that's a metric that you can Google, and I'm pretty sure there are like 3 different huge organizations that track excess deaths around the world. And
there are many more than 3, yes, in every single European country. Right. Okay. Well, so one relatively straightforward hypothesis is that it's a consequence of the disruption of the healthcare system, the staving off of cancer treatment, etc., the increase in depression, anxiety, suicidality, and alcoholism that was a consequence of the lockdowns, the economic disruption. And there's plenty of reason to believe that some of that is the case. But the other obviously glaring possibility is that injecting billions of people with a vaccine that was not tested by any stretch of the imagination with the thoroughness that it should have before it was forced upon people also might be a contributing factor, partly because we know that it led to a rise in myocarditis among young men. And we also know that there was absolutely no reason whatsoever to ever recommend that that vaccine was delivered to young children. Whose risk of death at COVID was so close to 0 that it might as well have been 0.
When you're talking about a disease, the risk of death isn't the only thing that you worry about for the disease. There's also
so you're going to talk about transmission? Because that was another thing that the COVID vaccine pushed. Yeah, but it didn't do anything to transmission.
It absolutely did, because it decreased your chance of getting infected. It didn't destroy. It didn't get rid of transmission, but it reduced transmission.
Yeah, but it was claimed that it would get rid of transmission.
Only if you take one reading of one single quote. I think that Biden said one time where he said, "No, come on." I've heard so many times because everybody say, "Oh, you can't take anything Trump says seriously." Biden one time on the news says, if you get the vaccine, you won't transfer the disease.
That is so silly.
You're arguing with something I didn't say. I'm saying the official narrative was that it didn't come from the lab. If you get the vaccine, you cannot get it and you cannot transmit it. These were huge stories that were flatly wrong. No, you're shaking your head. That's not wrong.
The official position of the NIH or the government was not that if you get vaccinated, you will never transmit it and you will never get sick. I know that there is the one quote that people, yes, I'm aware that there's the one quote, but for anybody that honestly followed any of that or saw all of the statements, nobody actually thought that. It is unfathomable to me that people that will make so many excuses for every single Trump gaffe will come out and take like 7 words quoted by the president. Oh my God, they said the vaccine was 100% effective. It would never, that's unbelievable. Nobody really thought that. That's an unbelievable position.
Fine.
During 2021, we should be able to manufacture a lot of vaccines, and that vaccine, key goal is to stop the transmission, to get the immunity levels up so that you get almost no infection going on whatsoever. Everyone who takes the vaccine is not just protecting themselves, but reducing their transmission to other people and allowing society to get back to normal?
We can kind of almost see the end. We're vaccinating so very fast. Our data from the CDC today suggests, that vaccinated people do not carry the virus, don't get sick.
And he is saying what they said right there, they didn't really meant it like that. I'm like, really? If I said that on your server Discord, you would have banned me immediately for quoting misinformation.
You know that our Prime Minister in Canada deprived Canadians of the right to travel for 6 months?
No.
Do you know that
Biden one time on the news says if you get the vaccine, you won't transmit the disease.
That is so silly.
Which was it? No.
Do you know that our Prime Minister in Canada deprived Canadians of the right to travel for 6 months because the unvaccinated were going to transmit COVID with more likelihood than the vaccinated? So this wasn't one bloody statement. This was
hold on.
thorough government policy
what
in
I'm
my
saying
country.
is there wasn't a statement given that if you get vaccinated, there is a 0% chance of transmitting the disease. The idea is that vaccines were supposed to help because it reduces your hospitalization, it reduces death, and it reduces transmission, hopefully by making it so that people don't get sick or don't get sick for as long. All three of those things the vaccines did exceedingly well. They continue to do that to this day, but especially for the first variant and then the Delta variant, the vaccines helped immensely here. They were tested. The myocarditis rates are like 7 out of 100,000 injections, and the myocarditis is generally acute, and it's generally not as bad as even getting the coronavirus itself, which will lead you also to having myocarditis.
It's a much worse side effect than side effects that have caused other vaccines to be taken off the market before.
But 7 out of 100,000 rate of acute myocarditis or pericarditis is not a worse side effect than any other vaccine. I think that is a completely acceptable, given that the disease itself is more likely to cause myocarditis or pericarditis.
Yes, I don't think the data suggests support that presupposition anymore. The latest peer-reviewed studies show that that's simply not true, especially among young men.
So there is an age bracket of young men where the elevated rate of myocarditis, acute myocarditis from the vaccine might have been higher, but we're talking about like 3 or 4 cases per 100,000 people. And again, myocarditis, pericarditis are generally acute conditions. They don't last for very long.
I told you at the beginning of this conversation that the progressive leftists were on the side of the pharmaceutical companies.
It's not about being on the side of the pharmaceutical companies. It's about
really. So what I see as the unholy part of that alliance with the pharmaceutical companies is that it dovetails with the radical utopians' willingness to use power to impose their utopian vision.
Well, then what do you make
of the fact
otherwise,
how would you explain it? Because the leftists should have been the ones that were most skeptical about the bloody pharmaceutical companies. And they jumped on the vaccine bandwagon in exactly the same way.
In the beginning, Trump made it happen, right? A lot of people were saying, I ain't taking that quickie thing.
If the public health professionals, if Dr. Fauci, if the doctors tell us that we should take it, I'll be the first in line to take it. Absolutely. But if Donald Trump tells us that we should take it, I'm not taking it.
Pharmaceutical companies have helped us tremendously throughout the...
Right, there we go. Fine. No,
you think modern
I don't
medicine
think
hasn't?
so. No, I don't think so.
You're just wrong.
I think they're utterly wrong. I see. So you don't think that the pharmaceutical companies who dominate the advertising landscape with 75% of the funding are corrupt?
I don't... Corrupt is a very broad...
No, it's...
Do you think that
corrupt with a tinge of malevolence, willing to extract money out of people by putting their health on the line?
Do you think that we get effective drugs from pharmaceutical companies?
Not particularly.
Okay. Wow.
Do you think that any vaccines work?
Yes.
Okay.
Do you think that any...
I don't think 80 of them work at once for babies. I think that's a little risky.
But yet we've been on this vaccine schedule for how many decades?
Like this, not like this, not carefully.
I had a ton of vaccines when I was a child. I'm pretty sure that was the norm for people.
In America.
There's way more now.
In Spain, when they checked my blood, they were like, yo, you don't have almost anything. What the heck? How are you alive? I'm like, I don't know. I'm never sick.
And you think
and you can understand why. I mean, look, part of it, no doubt, part of it is a consequence of the genuine willingness to protect children. But the moral hazard is quite clear, and people on the left used to be aware of this.
What do you make of the fact? What do you think the mRNA vaccine, the speeding up of it, came from? How do you make for the fact that it was Donald Trump that did warp speed?
Yeah,
terror.
Nobody wanted
that. Foolish panicking, just like we're doing with the climate issue.
So you think Trump was he in bed with the pharmaceuticals? Was he working with the left, or was it just a dumb? That was the only panicky thing he made. He didn't try to push for the mass lockdowns like other far left people would have wanted him to do. That was just the one mistake he made, was the pushing for the vaccine.
No, I think Trump undoubtedly made all sorts of mistakes, and it certainly wasn't only the left that stampeded toward the forced COVID vaccine debacle. But it was most surprising to me that it emerged on the left, because the left at least had been protected against the depredations of gigantic predatory corporations by their skepticism of the gigantic enterprises that can engage in regulatory capture, and that just vanished.
Is it not possible that maybe people looked and they said, hey, if all the governments, all the institutions, all the schools, all the private companies across all the countries around the world are saying the same thing, maybe it is the case that this vaccine just helps. Is that not possible?
Oh, sure. Of course it's possible, but that didn't mean it was right. Well, they used force. They used force.
We use force for all sorts of things in terms of public health.
We don't generally use force to invade people's bodies.
How long have vaccine mandates been a thing? In Canada, the United States, and the entire world?
I don't think they should have been a thing.
That's great if you don't think they should have been, but when you say we don't generally use force, we absolutely use force. We've enforced vaccines for a long time. It's an important part of public health.
Fair enough. We did it on a scale and at a rate during the COVID pandemic, so-called pandemic, that was unparalleled. And the consequence of that was that we injected billions of people with an experimental, and it wasn't a bloody vaccine.
Of course
no, it wasn't.
Yes, it was.
No, it isn't.
Yes, it is.
JP getting worked up by this guy.
100% success rate? You think it's a definition of vaccine? The whole point of the vaccine is to give your body a protein to train on so that your immune system works. Who cares if it's not the same? There's different types.
They used the word vaccine so that they didn't have to contend with the fact that it wasn't the same technology.
There are different types of vaccines that are different technologies.
Fine.
The mRNA vaccines is a type of vaccine technology.
Vaccines. Now this is vaccines.
No, it was like this, and now it's like this.
No. It was like this, and now it's like this. The mRNA technology was a radical, qualitative leap forward in technology. You can call it a vaccine if you want to, but it bears very little resemblance to any vaccine that went before that. And the reason it was called a vaccine was because vaccine was a brand name that had a track record of safety, and shoehorning it in that was one of the ways to make sure that people weren't terrified of the technology. And
I think the reason it's called a vaccine is because they're injecting you with something that's inoculating you against something in the future, because it has proteins that resemble a virus that infects your immune system.
There are overlaps between the mRNA technologies and vaccines, to be sure, but they wouldn't have been put forward with the rate that they were put forward if they weren't a radical new technology. And it's bad in principle to inject billions of people with an untested new technology.
Isn't it also bad in principle for billions of people to get infected with a worldwide pandemic that initially was causing a decent number of deaths, a ton of complications, shutting down world economies?
Maybe it was. Maybe it was.
So shouldn't we be able to engage in that analysis and figure out, like, if we look at the
we're not engaging in the analysis.
No, because now we're talking about whether or not vaccines are even vaccines or not instead.
No, don't play that game. That is not what I was doing. I was making a very specific and careful case.
Yeah.
The mRNA technology, by wide recognition, is an extraordinarily novel technology. And
that doesn't make it not a vaccine, though.
Well, okay, it's a radically transformed form of vaccine. I don't give a damn. That still makes it something so new that the potential danger of its mass administration was highly probable to be at least or more dangerous than the thing that it was supposed to protect against. And we are seeing that in the excess deaths.
Absolutely not saying. So are you implying now that the excess deaths were caused by the vaccines, or
I don't bloody.
I feel like Destiny wants to get him on a gotcha moment, like, oh, so you do like Trump. Oh, so you hate Trump. So why did you think like this? So you are against the fee thing, or you're not with the fee thing. You blame the fee thing. What do you want him to say? All Jordan Peterson is saying is that the way you push it in that direction, I might do it, but it doesn't mean I trust you. So as a person that see you change your opinion for something that you're not supposed to trust, and suddenly you trust it, and it is new, and you're telling me, well, we forced everybody a long time ago, but you're the people that hate force.
Well, know what they're
That's what you're implying now.
Well, look, if you're going to use Occam's razor, you're kind of stuck in an awkward place here.
I'm absolutely not stuck in it. This is the most administered vaccine of or inoculation, or whatever you're going to call it, in the history of all of mankind. Every single organization around the world is motivated to call this out if it was a bad thing. You don't think Russia or China would be screaming if Donald Trump or the United States warp sped through a vaccine that was having deleterious effects on populations all around the world? You don't think there wouldn't be some academic institution? You didn't think there'd be more than a handful of doctors and Joe Rogan and some conservatives saying this vaccine might have been bad if it was the case that American companies working with companies in Europe and Germany especially actually, why? Because that's where BioNTech is from, in order to create or manufacture a vaccine that was causing excess deaths all around the world. There are so many different people that we motivated to call this out. How do you explain the fact that no, it's a handful of people? Where are the governments calling it? Where are the academic institutions calling it? Where are the other private companies calling it? We can finally talk about it now. Wouldn't you stand to make a killing if you were a private company in Europe and you could say, look, the mRNA vaccines for sure are causing all of these issues? Why wouldn't Putin, why wouldn't Xi Jinping, why wouldn't anybody else in the world call this out if it was as horrible as it was?
There are plenty of people attempting to call
Nobody credible, and no huge institution.
No doctors, cool.
What do you make of the excess deaths? You haven't come up with a bloody hypothesis.
I don't even know if there are 20% at the excess deaths in Europe right now. If I had to guess off the top of my head, it's going to be, like you said, one might be lingering effects of an overwhelmed healthcare system. Another one might be deaths related to the war in Ukraine. Another one might be rising energy costs that have happened for a couple of reasons.
But it's absolutely impossible that any of it could be unintended consequences of a novel technology injected into billions of people.
I think that if excess, first of all, there aren't billions of people in Europe. So if there were excess deaths, I understand, but you're talking about excess deaths in Europe. I'm not aware of excess deaths that exist in other places that are completely and totally unaccounted for, where the only explanation could be the vaccine.
There's a bunch of accounts talking about that already, but that's a different story. He'll investigate on his own. Cool.
I think if there were, I think more people would be talking about it.
Well, first of all, the number of people talking about something is not an indication of the scientific validity of a claim.
I agree with that, but for a vaccine,
then why are you using mass consensus as the determinant of what constitutes?
Because I think for something,
that's never been the case.
Because I think for something that was given to billions and billions of people, if this was something that was having a measurable effect on people, it would be impossible to cover it up or ignore it.
The amount of people that tried to talk about it and got their channel closed wherever they were, unless you maybe were on Rumble, but Rumble wasn't the thing back in the day, you would just get banned, removed from the platform.
We wouldn't have to look at the one case brought up on a documentary. We would have to look at the one thing being talked about.
Then what do you make of the VAERS data? There's more negative side effects reported from the mRNA vaccines than there were reported for every single vaccine ever created since the dawn of time. And not by a small margin. So it's not just the excess deaths.
I agree.
It's the VAERS data.
What is VAERS data?
Oh.
It's the database that until the COVID-19 pandemic emerged and we had the unfortunate consequence that there were so many side effects being reported, it was the gold standard for determining whether or not vaccines were safe. And now as soon as it started to misbehave on the mRNA vaccine front, we decided that we were going to doubt the validity of the VAERS reporting system.
Okay, the VAERS reporting system never been the gold standard for anything. VAERS reporting is just if you want to report that there is some issue that you have after getting a vaccine. That's it. I think it's vaccine adverse.
What the hell do you think it was set up for?
To report adverse events that happen after a vaccine, to track and see if something was related to the vaccine.
Right.
So most people didn't even know VAERS existed until after the COVID vaccine. Once people know that it exists, of course, more people are going to engage with it. But what happens when you submit a report? No, it could be or it couldn't be. So what do? When a bunch of stuff
first of all, you might begin by suggesting that maybe it's not all noise.
Correct. So when all of these things are admitted to VAERS, what they do is, from there, they investigate. All you can do, all VAERS is I might go and get a vaccine, and maybe in 3 days ago, I got a headache. I'm going to go ahead and call my doctor and make this report. And they'll say, okay, well, it's an adverse event after vaccine. Doesn't mean the vaccine.
Even if that is true, if they check the VAERS, are the people that idiot that they cannot separate the information and be like, this is this, and he's like, no, it's just a bunch of people screaming headache. I'm like, come on, man. It's so disingenuous how he looks at the information in the angle that he agrees and the angle that he wants to be right, and they find that disingenuous.
Caused the headache, and now that more people know about this system than ever, I'm just saying that VAERS is not the gold standard of determining if a vaccine is working or not. Compared to actual longitudinal, prospective, randomized controlled trial studies.
You mean like the ones they should have done to the goddamn vaccines?
Like the ones that they do for the vaccines to this day. Yes, that is correct.
Yeah.
Yes,
you really think that you're in a position to evaluate the scientific credibility of the trials for the vaccines, do you?
Yes, because he read it in a source or on Wikipedia and he knows it better than you. He thinks everything is wrong on the other side because everybody is too fanatic, because he also doesn't understand why people are so fanatically in love with Trump.
No, really? I don't. So I have to trust.
Then what are you doing?
I have to do,
I don't trust them. I looked at the bloody data.
First of all, you have to trust third parties to some extent.
No!
I don't have to trust.
Of course you do. You do every day. When you turn the keys in your car, you hope your engine doesn't explode. When you're drinking water, you hope that the public water or whatever tap or bottled water you got it out of isn't contaminated or poisoned with cholera.
I don't do that as a consequence of consensus.
No, you of course you do.
No, I don't. I do that as a consequence of observing multiple times that when I put the goddamn key in the ignition, the truck started.
Yeah. Why do you know it's going to start the 50th or the 100th time? Why do you, how many times do you wear the...
with me.
I'm
you know
not
perfectly
playing
well
Hume.
why.
You don't know if the denim in those jeans isn't leaking into your bloodstream to some extent.
He is so disingenuous. If I drink water a bunch of time, well, I guess I'm alive. That's it. I don't trust the water. I just know it's not killing me.
We have to trust third-party institutions to make determination.
When they use force.
Hey,
how about that?
When they use force. We trust the police officers. We trust the judicial systems.
We do. We on the left trust the police.
To some extent, do. If somebody's breaking into your house, who do you call?
Them.
I'm not a defunder, but if somebody's breaking into your house, you can be the most defund person in the world. Who are you going to call? Are you going to call your neighbor? Are you going to call Joe Biden? Are you going to call Obama? Are you going to call the Black Panthers? You're going to call the cops.
Okay, so tell me this. Tell me this then, because the core issue here is use of force as far as I'm concerned. You know, we examined some of the weeds around that. Politicians throughout the world, and this would be true on the conservative side now, in the aftermath of the COVID tyranny, because it was more a tyranny than a pandemic, are now saying that we actually didn't force anybody to take the vaccine. So what do you think of that claim? So let's define force.
I think it's technically true, but I think it's silly.
What do you mean it's technically true? Define
technically
force,
true,
then.
and that in the United States, at least, I think the idea, what they tried to do, they weren't able to do it because the Supreme Court shot it down, was Biden tried to make it so that OSHA, who's the body that regulates job safety, could make it so that employees had to get vaccinated. Now, eventually, or they'd lose their job.
Okay, does that qualify as force?
That's why I said technically.
Yeah, but it's a serious question. I mean, because we need to define what constitutes force before we can. It seems to me...
You could argue it's a type of force, sure. I mean, I think it'd be silly to say it's nothing. It is a type of force. It is the same as a cop telling you have to do this, you're going to be killed. No, but it's on the spectrum, sure, of course.
This is something that I notice a lot when I debate leftists. You can have a word with two meanings. I'm a woman and I'm a woman. And it's so annoying because you can never get something done. Everything is obfuscated. And if you don't say anything, well, nobody's complaining. I guess this is the new normal.
Yeah.
It's as much force as the mRNA vaccines are vaccines.
See?
Sure.
See?
It is a type of force, and the mRNA vaccines are a type of vaccine.
I really think the problem was with the COVID response. I really think the problem was the use of force. I mean, I can understand to some degree, although I'm very skeptical of the pharmaceutical companies and far more skeptical than your insistence upon the utility of consensus might lead me to believe you're skeptical of them, which is surprising, I would say, given that
I'm very skeptical of them. That's why I'm glad there's multiple companies, multiple countries, multiple academic institutions that do research, and the FDA. Yeah.
But you still would force it. And if I was on your special Discord channel and I said the same thing you're saying right now, if I was Jordan Peterson or if I was him, that's how radical the times were.
Skeptical. You should be in any private system. You should be skeptical of every private company, of course. Whether we're talking media, pharmaceuticals, or automobile manufacturers, yeah. But skepticism doesn't mean a blind adherence to the complete total opposite of whatever it is they're saying.
That's what you think that we think.
Right? There are undoubtedly, like, if you look at Alzheimer's research, there's been groundbreaking improvements on drugs to treat Alzheimer's research over the past 3 years that 5 years ago, none of these drugs even existed. And now, so I mean...
How about if you're skeptical of anyone who's willing to use force to put their doctrine forward?
Then you're skeptical of literally every single person, political ideology ever have existed in all of humankind. Some degree of force, you would undoubtedly believe this, right? Some degree of force is probably necessary for any kind of cohesive society, right?
No, I don't believe that.
Of course there is.
No,
even if you had a tribe of 100, 120 people, if somebody was stealing something, right? You have to punish that person.
I said earlier that becomes complicated when you're dealing with the psychopathic types.
And to not make it long, I'll just stop it right here because they're going in a whole different direction about psychopathy and everything like that. Yes, there is a sense of force to keep each other in check. You can call the cops bada beam bada boom. The government wasn't the cop that you would call like, hey, help us, I need force. No, they went to your home and be like, yo, this is the force. They went to your job, all the places you want to go, the gym, bada beam bada boom. This is the new force. Like, they literally controlled your life. And they said, if you want to have more freedom, you got to do this, this, and that. And it felt that many things that we did, we didn't get the freedom anyway. I'm just glad I saw this conversation. I'm not going to talk about the pokey poke. I don't freaking care about it. It's not the point of the video. It's just about how two ideas are meshing up with each other, and you can tell me right now which one is more honest. But anyway, like, share, the usual. Peace. Have a nice one.
Don't get me wrong, ako sa kita bong. Buta fire na mi blonde, kush hash, purple skunk, criollo, colombici, jam, turloqueta, verdeta, welcome.